Phillies get a big boost from Aaron Altherr last night as he goes 3 for 4, a dinger, 2 runs scored, 2 ribbies. But what does the future hold for him and this team as Monday's deadline approaches? Not as active as they've been the last couple of years, but there is one name, Jeremy Hellickson. Should you expect to see him in a Phillies uniform, Ryan Lawrence? PhillyVoice.com covers the Phillies. Make sure you check out his stuff at PhillyVoice.com. He joins us now with a look at the Phillies at the deadline, Ryan, where the last couple of years when we've talked, there's been a lot bigger names, but this one's very interesting because would you say the Phillies actually have a little bit of power here with Hellickson? I mean, they can kind of hold out and wait till the offseason if they want. Do they have to move him, or is it somebody that they really just don't see in their future and want to move him?
I mean, yeah, you can look at it a couple different ways. I mean, right now it's a seller's market. They're just the simple economics of supply and demand. There aren't many starting pitchers available, at least ones that can help a team in one way or another. Not that Jeremy Hellickson is a Cole Hamels type, but he's still a type that can go and help a contending team. Not unlike Joe Blanton did with the 2008 Phillies, kind of a guy that'll still upgrade your rotation. Maybe not the top, but somewhere in the middle. But yeah, I mean, the Phillies could hold on to him, but the argument of holding on to him is then you extend him a qualifying offer because he is a free agent. And if you extend him a qualifying offer, he's going to go sign a multi-year deal somewhere else. They're not going to re-sign him to a multi-year deal. It doesn't make any sense for this team to do that with a guy like him. And so by extending him a qualifying offer, you would get draft pick compensation. So the way the Phillies look at it, yeah, make us an offer, and if that offer is a prospect that's better than the draft pick that we get, which will be sometime after the first round, then they'd probably make a deal. But, yeah, they can hold on to him and then take their chances with that prospect. But as I wrote yesterday, chances are the prospect that you're going to be offered back would be better than that draft pick because the player is that much closer to the major league. The draft pick, is going to be a guy either coming out of high school or college that would just be getting his feet wet in the minor leagues, where maybe you get a guy now for Hellickson that's a double-A guy, and the guy gets to the big league at some point next year. So.
Rye, Hellickson's name's the one. You've heard Velasquez's name that other teams have interest. I don't know that they'd be willing to move him, but with those arm issues, is he a guy that you would consider, or is he an untouchable for you? Do they have an untouchable?
I don't think anybody's ever an untouchable, to be honest with you. I mean, because even if you want to say J.P. Crawford's an untouchable, well, what if you were to make a run at Mike Trout? Then I don't think J.P. So I don't think anybody's untouchable. That said, it is hard to find top-of-the-rotation type arms, and Vince Velasquez surely looks like he could be one day. But then again, you don't shut your ears or turn off your phone to any calls about any player. Again, I mean, no one really thought this time last year when Ken Giles was just taking over as closer and did a pretty good job as closer that he would be a guy that you would look to shop. But, when you can get back 5 pitching prospects for a Ken Giles, sure, you think about it and you do it, depending on those prospects. And ironically, one of those guys is Velasquez. And sure, you listen, and if somebody wants to, quote-unquote, overpay or they want to give you an attractive so you just have to see what the value is. And, if someone wants to offer you a pretty good everyday player that you can plug into your lineup for the next decade for Vince Velasquez, then maybe that's worth it to you. But, I don't think that there's a great chance of that happening. But, you don't, again, you listen to anything. So you'd be doing a disservice if you
Sure.
called anybody an untouchable.
So who are guys that you think are candidates? If Hellickson's the main name, who are some guys that you think make sense?
I mean, probably some of the bullpen arms. I mean, David Hernandez would not be one just because he's pitched himself out of that. Going into this year, he'd be an obvious guy because he's had a lot of success in the back of the bullpen in his career, but he's just not pitching well in the last couple of months, so I don't think he's a guy. But I think Jenmar Gomez could be a guy, but as I wrote yesterday, I'm not sure what you'd get back for Jenmar Gomez. I know he's got a lot of saves this year, but he isn't exactly the kind of dominating guy at the end of a bullpen that I don't think a team's going to give you a lot for him. So it might be worth it for you to hold on to him. They could hold on to him for next year, too, and just have a guy that's solid at the back end of the bullpen. Because there's nothing more discouraging than a young team than losing games late that you should win. So he might have more value to them. I think Hector Neris could be a guy. I mean, sort of in that same Ken Giles vein of a young guy that's under control for the next 5 years, so why would you trade him? But then again, maybe you sell high. And you get a guy, any other team could plug him into their bullpen, and he's probably a really good eighth inning guy. If he's never been a closer, so I don't want to say he can be a closer, but a really good eighth inning guy because of his strikeouts. I think there's only 7 guys that have a better strikeout rate in baseball than Hector Neris, relief pitchers. So, he could be a difference maker for a team, and because he's young, under team control, and cheap, you could get probably a decent amount back for him, definitely more than you can get back for Gomez. So I'm not saying they're going to trade him, but I think that it would make some sense. And then one of the catchers, I mean, there's no secret that the Phillies have a couple catching prospects that aren't that far away from the big leagues. So I think Ruiz, soon to be free agent, you kind of do what you did with Chase Elliott last year, maybe send him to a contending team, let him get a chance to go to the playoffs. I think that would make some sense if you can get something back. And even Cameron Rupp, you can listen in the same vein that you're listening on any of these guys. Man, Jorge Alfaro, I think, is going to be the catcher of the future, and even Andrew Knapp, is a pretty good prospect that I think you certainly listen on your catchers.
Ryan Lawrence is with us. PhillyVoice.com is where he covers the Phillies. Make sure you go over there and check out his Philly stuff. Ryan, how do you play this if you're the Phillies the rest of the year? You've got some young players who are kind of knocking on the door. You don't want to just go right to Nick Williams and Crawford and Jake Alfaro and just throw them out there. But how do you play these last 2 months for a team that, it's not going to make the playoffs, but they've got young players. They've got some guys up here that, have they seen enough of the Ashies? I don't know what you do with the Borges situation now that he's hurt. You brought up Altherr. They're in an interesting spot over the last 2 months where sometimes these teams, they go to the December call-ups. They give these guys a chance. How do they play these last 2 months, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, Altherr and Ashe are, everything is a different situation, every position. But, Altherr and Ashe both, it's a shame that they both got hurt, in spring training, because you would have a little bit better understanding of what they are at this point in the season if they both didn't miss as much time as they did. Now, Ashe has certainly been back for, 2 months now. So you have a little bit more of an idea. But I think, it's still like to see, if he can, because he's been hot and he's been cold, well, let's see what we can do in that third month. And then is it 2 out of 3 were good months or 2 out of 3 are bad months? And maybe that gives you a better idea. Although he has a longer track record as a big leaguer, too, where with Altherr, you definitely need to give him the at-bats and need to see what he's about for sure. And obviously that affects what you could do with someone like Nick Williams and when you bring him up. And then in the middle of the infield, I think we have a pretty good idea what Freddie Galvis is. And, I mean, his defense is really, really good. You can't really say you can't emphasize it enough just how good his defense is. He is what he is as an offensive player, which isn't a whole lot. Cesar Hernandez is probably not a starter in the big league, so I wouldn't be entirely surprised if at some point in the next month that JP does come up and Freddie probably moves over to second because Freddie's defense is just that good, and Hernandez kind of transitions into being a utility guy. So I think it's all case-by-case basis, and in the catching, too. If one of those catchers get traded, then maybe one of the other minor leaguers comes up, but I don't think either one of them, the catching prospects, are knocking on the door to be up tomorrow, I should say, but maybe in September.
Hey, give me your take on Hoskins and Cousins, those two players that, all of a sudden we keep hearing about these guys, but it doesn't seem they are ranked in any, pipeline top 100s or any top prospect rankings. Are these guys future Phillies? Are they guys that the team is looking at?
Yeah, I mean, Cousins I think he's a top 10 prospect in the Phillies and in pretty much every publication. I mean, he's a guy that is a second-round pick, so he comes with a little bit of a pedigree. He's an athlete. He can run for a big guy that has some power. His defense in the outfield isn't going to crush you. I mean, you can put him out in right field, and he has a pretty strong arm. But, yeah, I mean, I think you're going to have to see him take that next step as a prospect next year, because, AAA and AA, you are seeing different pitching. So I think that, he'll need to probably put 2 good years in a row down together before we could say this guy looks like the real deal, looks like a legitimate outfield prospect that can be a part of the nucleus of this team in years to come. And Hoskins is very similar. I mean, I don't think he's as highly touted as a Cousins, maybe because he's a little bit more one-dimensional. I mean, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but he's a first baseman, so that kind of limits you. But he's got the bat tool looks pretty good. That said, Redding is an offensive. The ballpark is is very friendly to hitters, I should say. And again, I don't want to take anything away from him. You hit 30 home runs before August, you're doing something right. So he's obviously a pretty good hitter. But again, just it's 1 year. I know last year he had 17 home runs in Class A, but these guys are just like they're one rung behind guys like Crawford and Williams for a reason because, they're in Double-A. So I think with both of those guys, you'll have a better idea of what they are, say 2 or 3 months into the next year when they've probably been at Triple-A, and so I think we'll just have a better idea of where they fit and what they could be after they get to Triple-A and have some experience there.
Yeah. We're talking with Ryan Lawrence here. Phillies continuing their series with the Braves. Velasquez tonight. They're going to have some interesting choice. Spring training is going to be fun next year. They're going to have some interesting decisions to make down there. There's going to be a lot of young guys knocking on the door. This should be a really intriguing offseason for Clintac.
Yeah, and even this past spring training, there was so much more young blood in there because all these guys we're talking about, well, not all of them, but a lot of them were in spring training this year. I mean, Crawford was there, and Williams was there, and Roman Quinn was there, and all the pitchers that are either already here or on their way, they were there. And yeah, it's only going to get younger in the offseason. I mean, there's not going to be any Carlos Ruiz or Ryan Howard anymore. It's going to be really weird to be in a big league clubhouse in the Phillies and not have any of those guys from '08 around anymore. It's going to be strange. And and that brings up a good point. They're probably going to need to. You can't have a team of completely 25 and under guys. You need to have some veterans in there. So I think that'll be something in the offseason that, I don't think it's going to be a priority, but, I think they will look to kind of fill some gaps and maybe even get someone for, a starting position to be, because I think you need to have someone that carries that kind of weight and then teaches everyone how to play a little bit. Again, I'm not sure if you have an everyday starting 8 of all guys under 25, if that's a good thing. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having good young guys that are learning to play in the big leagues, but I think there is something to be said for having, some veteran leadership.
Ryan Lawrence here. Enjoyed the conversation as always as the Phillies continue, and that trade deadline is Monday, not the 31st like normal. It's Monday, the 1st this year because of the day falling on a Sunday here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Thanks, Rye.
All right, Mike. Have a good one.